Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. It's my distinct pleasure to have on this episode Dr. Dain Heer. Dane is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and internationally renowned speaker. His book, Being You, Changing the World, is a #1 bestseller, and it has been translated into nearly 20 languages. He also is the author of other books, but we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Dane, it's so great to have you on the show.
Stephan, truly a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk, first of all, about consciousness and the nature of it and how it's shown up in your life. Like it's seemingly become a linchpin or a key focus for your life and your life's work, your mission. So I'd love to hear that origin story of how that came to be.
Well, yeah, you are correct. I'm a co-creator of something called Access Consciousness, and we're in 176 countries around the world at this point. And I actually started out as a chiropractor, and I became a chiropractor because I wanted to create miracles in people's lives. And I saw people that were doing that. They were creating these amazing changes, not just physically, but in a person's well-being. And I got to a place 21 years ago where I had been unhappy for the better part of 3 years. I didn't see that anything I was doing was working, and I'd finally given up hope for the first time in my life. And I was tired of struggling. And I set a date to end my life and had a plan for it. That's how bad it was. And what happened was I saw an ad for Access Consciousness, and I ended up having a session. I went into that session with a plan to end my life, depressed, suicidal, and struggling. And I came out of it with a gratitude for being alive and a sense that something was possible and something was possible to change that I had always hoped would exist, but I had never found in this lifetime. And so I was inspired. I knew something different was possible. And I also knew that I was never going back to that dark place. Well, so I started using the tools of this thing I'd never done called Access Consciousness. I started working with it. And within a few short months, I met the founder and we became fast friends. And so we've been part of creating it around the world. And back to your original question of consciousness, we actually have a definition of consciousness, which is where everything exists and nothing is judged. And it's truly, for me, it's a part of every breath I take. It's every waking, living, breathing moment. And the reason for that is because when you function from consciousness, your life just works. Your creations work, and your endeavors to do something different turn out far more easily than you ever imagined they could. And so, what my life's work is about is bringing people the awareness that there are other possibilities, but also the tools to actualize those possibilities. Because possibilities that you know that you can't seem to get to are a source of frustration, anxiety, struggle, and a sense of failure. And so these are the things that actually start to change in people's lives as this becomes available to them.
So what actualized in your life as you started applying the tools from Access Consciousness? I mean,
Oh,
you got out of the suicidal rut that you were in, but what else happened? Like there must be some sort of miraculous set of events that gave you, without a doubt, sign that there was something more. Like the unseen world is more real than the seen world.
that is exactly what started becoming my walking, talking, breathing awareness. Was that what it really was for me? Was so this first session created a break in the pattern that had been going on for so long. And then I started using the tools and see, I'm a seeker. I'm one of those people who goes to weekend workshops and, reads books and is looking for anything he can to better his life, and was also at that point. But what would happen is I would go to a weekend workshop and feel like I found the answer to life. And then by the middle of the following week, it all caved back in on my head again because it wasn't sustainable in life. It was only sustainable in a classroom. And so what Access Consciousness has is a bunch of tools. We've got over 8,000 tools and ways of changing things in the trenches of life. And that's what I started doing. I would have a situation come up and I would go through my little list of tools that started accumulating one at a time, and I would try that. And the mark of whether it worked or not, in other words, got me back to my reality, was whether or not I got lighter and happier or more peaceful. Because one of the great awarenesses we can all take away from this is that what's true for us makes us lighter. A lie for us will always make us heavier. So if you're doing something and it's lighter, it's what's true for you. If you look at something or think about it and it's lighter, that's what's true for you. If it's heavy, it's not what's true for you, or there's a way of changing it necessary to make it light, to bring lightness to it. So what started happening for me was I started waking up light. I started waking up happy. And if that would dip during the day, I would have a way of changing it in that moment. And I don't know how many people have this sense, but for me, when I was growing up, I always had this I don't know if it's a dream or what, but this sense that it should be like life should be rich. It should be enthusiastic. It should be something that you love. And there was a sense associated with that I had from the time I was really young. And I remember experiencing it for moments, and then it would seem like it went away. What started happening with these tools is it started being there every moment of every day. And yeah, I would still have downs, but they wouldn't be nearly as low as before. And the ups just kept getting higher and higher, but not manically high, but sustainably lighter and lighter and lighter.
There's a point where you go beyond the normal spectrum of emotions, beyond even just joy and bliss, to where there's a place where it's even just a game, where you recognize like this is all, everything but love is an illusion, and this is a fun simulation, and I can co-create whatever I want. And it's hard to stay up in that place, and also to stay grounded to the to the physical reality at the same time. But I'm curious what your experience is of accessing that kind of emotional state.
I'm so grateful you put it exactly as you did, because exactly that. Anything that is not that we would call or associate with love is an illusion. And it truly is. It's like we're living in a vibrational virtual reality, but we're the programmers of it and we don't realize it. And, and that game analogy is so apropos in so many ways. And the thing about this is it's like you said, we have beyond what would be called bliss, and which is why I mentioned it's not a manic state. It's a state, or a space is what I would call it, a space of our being, really, which is where everything that occurs has total peace. Everything that occurs becomes just an interesting point of view. And what that means is you're no longer fighting, you're no longer resisting and reacting. And in the world
Yeah,
we're
you're
living
no
in right
longer
now,
triggered.
yeah, exactly. You're no longer triggered. Somebody goes, "You're a jerk." You're like, "Okay, thank you." Or, "Hey, what makes you say that?" Did I step on your toes? I really apologize. I didn't mean to. Where
Yeah,
you start to
it's like
function.
when Tony Robbins says that somebody's poking at you or pointing at you, saying you have purple eyes or something ridiculous. It's like that just rolls off your back.
That, and that's really, in that space, is something we call an access. We call it allowance, which is where everything is just an interesting point of view. And that's actually one of the tools that can be really helpful, which is where if you take some upset that you've got in your life, you just get the sense of that, the energy of that, the yuck, stuck, or what about that. And you just go, "Hey, interesting point of view. I have this point of view." You just, to that energy, everybody could do it right now if they wanted to, and do it or not. It's your choice. It's your life. I'm just doing this as maybe adding a tool to your life that might make things easier. But you just get the energy and go, "Interesting point of view. I have this point of view." And then you just be with it for a moment. And then again, "Interesting point of view. I have this point of view." And interesting point of view, I have this point of view. As the energy changes, usually between 3 and 10 times, that upset, you can't even find it in your world anymore. And that idea of letting things roll off like water off a duck's back is actually us being us. When we're truly
Mhm.
being us, things are ease and they have joy and they have a sense of peace and a sense of space.
Yeah. We have awareness of our awareness.
That
Yeah. So, how do you measure this lightness? Like you said earlier, how you'll just wake up in the morning and you'll feel lighter. Like, how do you know that you're lighter today than you were yesterday? Is there some sort of measurement? Are you muscle testing? Are you just kind of going with your gut? Do you have some sort of, I don't know, number that shows up in your mind's eye that's your lightness level?
I would say for me, it's more of a sense of having ease with everything going on around me. And so the lightness and gratitude and ease and joy tend to live together. They're similar vibrations. And
Mm.
so for me, because to put it on a scale creates a scale, which means what are you going to do when it's 10 times that? It's interesting because I've asked so many people, because access consciousness, when people come to the classes and use the tools, the change that occurs in their life is beyond description usually. In other words, so many things change. It's not just because a lot of people come because they want to get something changed or handled. I've got a relationship problem, I got a money problem, I got a body thing, I got a happiness thing, but in working on that, what happens is everything else changes, because the only time we create a difficulty in our life is when we function from unconsciousness or anti-consciousness, whether we're functioning from unawareness or going against our awareness. If we function from consciousness, everything works with ease and it has a sense of lightness. And so for me, I've had so many times where I would ask somebody who'd been in access maybe a year, I'd say, okay, so if you were to tell people what changed in your life since the time you started using these tools and coming to these classes, what would you say? And they look at me, they go, are you kidding? I'm like, pick one. They're like, I can't pick one. Everything is different. The way I interact with my family, the way I interact with my body, money's coming easier. I look at the insanity in the world and I'm totally unaffected, and I'm creating possibilities in a way I never have before. And so it's one of these things where it's so indescribable that to try to measure it on any form of linear scale doesn't actually do it justice. But what I ask people to do is, for anything that you've done, look back at where you were when you started. How different are you today? And of course, that's a subjective assessment, but it really does bring the point home of how much change can be created in a particular amount of time. And also, what sense of future do you have now that you didn't have before? Because that's one of the other things that this way of looking at the world starts to invite, is rather than dread about the future, rather than I've got this thing and I've been doing it forever so I'll never change it, or I've tried to change this and it doesn't work, you start to recognize my choice creates. And if I truly desire something, I will be able to create it. Or if I desire to change something, I will find a way. And that is a really empowering space to live from.
Yeah, and it's one that is surprisingly powerful, not just for your own little sphere of influence that you think is your sphere of influence, but world events. You can change the outcome of whether World War III happens or not in your slice of the multiverse, because you're the observer, you're the pilot of that universe. And that was mind blowing to me. I didn't understand that until just this year. It's incredible. It's destiny changing, not just life changing. What are your thoughts
I
on that?
love that you bring that up, because most people aren't even willing to broach the concept. And that on the larger level, for me, I get to talk a lot about things that might be changed in a person's life, but ultimately for me, having this awareness and having the tools to actually function from consciousness in more areas, whether they're access consciousness or something else, I don't care. That's not important to me. But what is our awareness that we together craft the future of our world. And what are we choosing, and what can we choose that we've never acknowledged? And what else is possible beyond this current reality that we've never considered, that we can be part of creating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a small example, I've shared it maybe a couple times on this podcast, but this just shows how we are co-creators. We have two really big gifts from the Creator. One is free will, of course, and the other is co-creation. And co-creation gets short shrift, or even just ignored by many, many people. They just focus on their destiny, or what is, their karma, without being fully in the driver's seat of co-creating that reality, whether World War III happens or whether they win the lottery, right? So a small example in my life that happened a few months ago. I was driving. I had a package to drop off at FedEx. I didn't know where the FedEx drop-off location was, and I was playing with the concept of manifesting, of co-creating. I'd recently learned about it and how I can make it real. And so I asked for a FedEx truck to show up, and not even a minute later, a FedEx truck was right in my path. It was parked in between lanes, uh, between the two different directions. So all I had to do was stop where I was. There were no cars behind me, and hand my package to the FedEx guy who happened to be behind the truck. So that was just couldn't have been more perfect. I didn't have to go a millimeter out of my way. It took all of about 5 extra seconds to hand off the package, and I was done. And that was just such a great metaphor for life for me. That little FedEx truck that showed up out of the blue instantly is how we can live our lives. It's not just the FedEx truck, it's the really big things. It's our soulmate showing up 5 years earlier than was going to happen, because we were just so cut off from our own power and our own the vortex that has all of our wishes, dreams, and desires in there. So can you speak more about that?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love that FedEx truck example because it's so telling. And it would seemingly, in a lot of people's worlds might be a small thing, but what I found is it's the small things that add up. Most of us are looking for what is the huge choice and the huge change that I can make. It's got to be huge. But what I found is the quality of your life is made up by the small moments added together, and the quality of what you know is possible. So with the awareness of the FedEx truck, and it's interesting because, as you mentioned, co-creation and I would say people, you mentioned co-creation and free will. Most people don't get either. They would rather believe that there is something outside of them that is malevolently keeping them down than that there is something inside of them that is unstoppable. And clues start to arise as you start to go on this journey. And what is the journey? Just asking for more awareness, asking to know what you're truly capable of, to know what you can create, and to know what you can choose. But we've got to realize also, we tend to look for the one choice or the one change that rules them all, the Lord of the Rings choice, or the Lord of the Rings change, where it's like, yes, I have made one choice and now my whole life is different. That occurs sometimes, but more often what occurs that shows us we have choice, it shows us we are truly miraculous, is the small things that when we look back over them, we go, wow, I actually influenced that. I actually created that. And if we could, one of the things I ask people to do is to look back over your life at a couple of miracles you created, something you would call a miracle. And what's a miracle? Something you created that defies physical laws, shall we say, or you don't have an explanation for, if we want to make it really simple. And we all get the sense of having had things like that, but what we tend not to do is we tend not to acknowledge it. We tend not to go, hey, I asked for the FedEx truck, here it is. Most people go, well, isn't that serendipitous? It's not serendipitous. It is in one frame of reference, but in actuality, it was your choice that created that. It is also your request for that. And so
it's all in the asking.
yeah, that. And the thing is, there's a request in our world. One of the other things that I was working with a lady who was doing access for a while, and she was like, I really want my money situation to change, and it's not changing. And I said, well, have you asked? And she went, oh, no. I said, will you now, please? Just get this in. And the ask can just be the sense of the way it would be to have it be different, to have ease with it. And I said, so will you now? And she said, yeah. And I saw her 6 months later. I'm like, how's the money thing? She's like, what money thing? As soon as I asked, things started changing. So there's the request, which is, for me, I'm a big fan of asking questions, but actual open-ended questions like, how does it get any better than this when something good or bad happens? What else is possible I've never considered before? What would it take for this to show up with ease? And what's right about me or what's right about the situation I'm not getting? And what it does is it opens up another doorway of possibilities that you didn't see before you asked the question. And if we
Which
couple
brings
that,
another point that I think is really important. I've just recently learned it from Kabbalah, and that is, in Kabbalah, a miracle isn't defined as when the impossible becomes possible, but instead it's defined as removing the illusionary veils that don't allow us to see the light in every experience and moment.
boom, right there. And here's the other conversation I'd like to add into this, which is so you're reading this beautiful passage of what is from the Kabbalah, because I would, once again, what's true makes you lighter, and I would say everybody here, probably everybody listening, probably has more of a sense of lightness after reading that. Now, here's the thing that for me is why I do access consciousness, is taking that awareness that is actually what is true, and now integrating it and actualizing it in and as our lives and living it. Because part of the reason I gave up hope 21 years ago was because I had been doing so many searches, spiritual, metaphysical, financial, business, all kinds of things. There were lots of things I wanted to change, relationships, etc. And part of what was going on for me was I would read something like that. I would know it was true, but then I had no way to change what I was doing, or the tools that I had at the time they were not about, basically for me, this awareness that we have, this awareness you just stated with the reading from the Kabbalah, for example, is an acknowledgement of what occurs when you function from consciousness. And what I see is us functioning from consciousness is the one thing that will change. And what is consciousness? Awareness. And once again, where everything exists and nothing is judged. That one choice, or that it's not one choice, it's an ongoing choice. But if we had that, we have the ability to function miraculously and change everything in the world that doesn't work on a small and large scale, and invite things that we can't even consider possible right now because we haven't experienced them, that the universe has in store for us if we would allow ourselves to expand our horizons and our awareness and truly embrace how miraculous we are.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
what I'm
Deepak
interested in.
Chopra says, we are infinite possibilities, and what you were describing about having that existential crisis 21 years ago, trying to fix all these issues in different areas of your life, financial and everything else. This is the trap that many of us get into, me included, is to chase after the relationship or the health or the financial breakthrough or whatever. And then other areas of life kind of fall to bits because we can't juggle all the plates simultaneously. So instead, this is another secret I learned from Kabbalah, which is to chase the white light. The white light, if you shine it through a prism, has all the colors in it and it's very visible and obvious. Those colors, the blues and reds and purples and all that, the violet, that is each area of your life. So if you're chasing after having the perfect body or chasing after a super successful business, and then you let other areas of your life slip because of it, that's the fallacy that you can, have all of the sides of the wheel all simultaneously at 10 out of 10. But instead, you chase the white light, which has all the colors in it, the white light being the light of the Creator and this light of mercy that's inside of you. Then all of the gifts, all of the areas of your life get revealed to you.
That it is, I don't actually have a good analogy, in my world, it's like you can choose to go for that which will change everything. And that is exactly what I've seen with people who choose more consciousness, however they're getting there, is that it creates a different platform for living. And as we mentioned, it takes you out of the fight and it puts you into the awareness that your choice actually does create. And that's a very, very powerful awareness to have. And you also realize, and I think a lot of the reason a lot of people don't truly desire to have that awareness is because they don't want to be responsible for the quote unquote negative choices that have occurred. But from this perspective, there is no negative, there is no positive, there just is. And it's about living that and getting to live that because what I've noticed about us weird people living on this planet, unlike animals, unlike plants, we seem to only be willing to become aware of what is through going through some form of problem and figuring it out and coming out the other side more aware. Well, okay, so that's part of the game. That's part of the vibrational virtual reality we're living in. Okay, cool. That's the way it seems to be set up. The gift of having a perspective that allows you to recognize that everything you thought was a problem is only a path to possibilities. It allows you then to no longer resist anything that you might call a problem or think is one, but to milk it for the awareness that it has and milk it for the capacities of you that it will show you. And in so doing, we no longer have to resist the things that aren't working. We move forward into them and we move forward facing them rather than avoiding them. And at the same time, we also don't try to shove it under the rug and go, oh, well, I forget the term I'm looking for here, but where, other than denial, but where somebody goes, no, I'm totally conscious. I'm totally aware. I'm totally spiritual. I'm so up here. And you look at their life and you look how they interact. You're like, I don't think you are where you thought you were,
Yeah.
This
spiritual
is like
bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing. Thank you. And that, and so with this different conversation available, it allows us to not try to have to do that, because part of the reason for doing that is because you're judging anything about you that's not perfect, because, well, you're perfect. You're a creation of God, however you want to look at it. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean anything we've got that is not quote unquote perfect is a judgeable offense that we should cut off from. Instead, we should look at it and see what is the beauty underneath it and what is the possibility within it that it's showing us. And you then stop avoiding living and you start embracing living.
Yeah. And as you're living in that present moment, if you make choices that are non-reactive, restricting your reactivity, and also proactive, then you reveal a lot more light. And if you look back on the times where you didn't do that, well, that's in the past. That's all part of the dream. That's not current, present moment reality. So you can look at yourself with love and compassion and forgiveness and not let it ruffle your feathers. So it's just like, oh, well, the hand of God plays in everything that happens. good, bad, whether we see it as good or bad is also based on our frame of reference, which is oftentimes not, well, I would say always not the full picture. So if we could zoom out long and far enough to see the bigger picture, we would see how everything is interconnected and how things that we did in past lives are now affecting us today. But just, love yourself and be okay with all the mistakes that you made, because it played a role, a purpose for everyone's highest and best good. You, of course, included, but also everyone who was affected, because there's, karmic debt to pay that you didn't know about. There are untold blessings that come from the person having to pick up the pieces from the damage that you created, but you're doing it from a place now in this present moment of least amount of harm, most amount of joy and unconditional love, and you just constantly living in that present moment. That's what I find works best for me, at least.
Well, yes, and I would like to add a question to that, if I may, which can at least start, if somebody's willing to ask it, to get that perspective, which is what's right about this I'm not getting, and also what's right about me I'm not getting, because this is the whole speed bump for me is it's one thing to know that there's a choice available. There's a choice to look at how you may have harmed somebody and recognize it was for their highest and greatest and yours. And then, and we try to do that a lot of times without actually being congruent with that energetically. And so what I found is there are a lot of people trying to do this mentally, but they don't have the tool to be congruent energetically, where they can actually look at it and not have a judgment of them or a judgment of someone else. This is why I say consciousness. We have this definition, which is where everything exists and nothing is judged, which is where, okay, I chose to do this. Here's the effects that it had from my perspective, at least. And okay, can I not judge myself for it? And if I did something messed up, make amends for it. And if we ask a question like, what's right about this I'm not getting, or what's right about me I'm not getting, it starts to head us in the direction of the doorway that we're looking through being not what's wrong about it, not what's wrong about me, but what is actually truly right about this situation. What worked about it? What change did it create that I'm not acknowledging? Because as you said, for every situation that occurs, at the very least, there's a chance for more awareness for everybody involved. And one of the other things I would talk to my friend and business partner, the founder of Access. His name is Gary Douglas. And I would talk to him and I'd go, ooh, this person says this person hurt them. And he would go, can anybody truly hurt anybody else? And I went, wait, no is lighter. Okay, but I don't get it, because this person is always talking about how people hurt them. And then we looked at it and I realized, oh yeah, they're playing the victim. That fits their story. Okay, fine. But I realized after looking at this with thousands of people over many years, nobody can truly hurt anybody else. How you respond to the situation as, oh, you hurt me, somebody else might respond as, thanks for the information. And so for me, that perspective starts to give us not the ability that I think a lot of people are afraid. If they truly have freedom, they're going to go around doing mean, bad, awful things. That's not those of you listening to this podcast. That's not you guys. The people that are going to go do mean, terrible, awful things are people who like to do mean, terrible, awful things. That's just what they are choosing right now. Not you guys who, if you truly had freedom, would do that. You actually wouldn't. And you would do your best to make amends. And if we recognize this about us and start looking for what's right about this I'm not getting, what's right about me I'm not getting, we start to recognize that we actually are greater than we've given ourselves credit for being. And we can't truly hurt somebody else who is not willing to see that as a hurt because that is their perspective, that is their choice.
Yeah. Yeah. So this making amends is another way of framing it is you're atoning, right? It's atonement, which is also at one. So you are one with the other person, with everyone that you've affected, and everyone that's affected you, positively, negatively, etc. And I just recently learned of this process. It's very simple on this side of the veil, at least, and it's called the full court of atonement. It's a request where, in a couple of sentences, you bring in all parties who have been affected. You might have been the perpetrator. You might be the quote unquote victim, although there are no victims, as so many people say. So if you call in all of these souls who have been involved in this issue and ask for a full court of atonement, then all of the things that were unresolved issues, the karmic debts, and the perspectives that weren't seen from the other person's viewpoint, etc. All of that is clean, cleared, resolved. But what's happening on the other side of the veil that we don't see when we make this request is essentially a legal proceedings. And most of these quote unquote cases are settled, right? Oh, okay, I see how I made the other person feel. And sometimes it takes the judge or the whoever's proceeding or running the proceedings to show one party the other party's viewpoint, so they see, feel, hear, and experience that event from their perspective, from the other person's perspective. Like, whoa, now I see how hurtful that was. Okay, yeah, I dropped my case, and or like the settlement is I'm going to send more business to my sister-in-law, or I'm going to do something extraordinary to make them feel loved and appreciated. That really goes out of my way. So this is as simple as just reciting a couple of sentences, which is making a request. It is a prayer. It is a request for a full court of atonement. And what happens behind the scenes, you don't need to see. Just know that things will shift. Over the next few days, you're going to notice a change of energy, a change in perspective, and in the relationships. It's really amazing. So I'm very excited about this. And there's a $5 book about it by Amy Jo, and I'll include it in the show notes, the link to it. But I'm curious, are you familiar at all with this concept?
Not that specifically. With the tools that I use, it would, we would go about it a different way. But at the same time, getting the awareness of this is, once again, the whole thing about consciousness for me is it's total awareness, which is both the interaction that you had in your perspective, but also being able to perceive the other person's perspective and what the effect was from their point of view. And also what may have been possible that didn't get created because both people had points of view, and then heading in the direction of that. But, for me, I love anything that will create more lightness for us. And because once again, when you're being you and what's true for you always makes you lighter. And Court of Atonement, this is where for me, I go, if it works for you, I think is brilliant. And that's the other thing is I would like people to try a lot more things rather than throw them out because it doesn't match some previous conclusion they have about what is and the way things have to work. But let's try more things. Let's try more things. And let's also be willing to screw more things up. I tell people I probably screwed up more things than most people have chosen. but I'm willing to choose and choose again and choose again and choose again. And if it doesn't work out, well, I'll choose again. And if we would give ourselves that freedom and recognize we're not perfect, we don't have to be perfect, is not actually the target anymore. Happy is. And start choosing more, try more things, try the court of atonement, try asking these questions, try anything that comes across your path that makes you feel remotely lighter. And then as you go through it, see if it makes you lighter. Yeah. And if it does, then that's something that actually worked for you. As you go through it, if it doesn't make you lighter, that's not something that's going to work for you. And if we would just realize just those couple of things and how easy it can be to have a life experience that in which we're allowed to have the experience, not perfectly curate the experience before we make the choice, which is what most people do. Most people, it's like we've gotten to this world in which it's kind of like if you were to drive your car, but you waited home until all the lights turn green on your path, and it doesn't ever happen. So people don't choose because they're afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of being judged by others, when in actuality, judgment has no power, ours or anybody else's. We've just given it a lot of power. It's like it's a paper tiger, and we don't have to live from that anymore. We don't have to live from the limitations that creates in our lives anymore. Let's experience life and living. Let's choose. Let's play. Let's create, and let's try more stuff.
Yeah, I love that. And the way I frame it is the willing suspension of disbelief. Because who wants to be a cynic?
Truly.
I'm a skeptic. Well, that's not such a great thing either, because that's just millimeters away from being a cynic, in my view.
Well, yes. And that's the thing is, I will question everything and everyone, but I will not disregard anyone or anything. And I will always allow it in. And I think it's okay to be skeptical, but I get your point. But not skeptical from dismissing it before experiencing it, dismissing it before checking into it at least, and seeing, once again, does it make you lighter? This one simple tool and awareness can allow us to navigate our lives from a totally different space. Does it make me lighter? No. Okay, then I may still have to do it. I may still have to visit my family that doesn't like me over the holidays, but at least I recognize that it's because there's a lot of stuff going on that's not really true for me, and probably not true for them either, that we call family. Okay, fine, I can still do it. But if we would start heading in the direction of those things that make us lighter, goodness, if we choose more things that make us lighter, what happens is over time that builds and builds and builds, and the space of our life has a lightness to it that we never imagined possible.
Yeah, and we become more relatable to the people that are in our sphere of influence, and a much larger sphere of influence shows up for us than we ever thought possible. And there's a little tiny book I read many years ago called How to Be a People Magnet. And in that book, there's a tool called Scrambling. And the concept is very simple. It's just try things that you weren't willing to before, that you didn't really gravitate towards, that, as long as they're not harmful. For example, if you have no interest whatsoever in golf, try it just once at least. And then you can talk to people who you wouldn't have had anything in common with before. Like, oh, I love golf. My handicap is whatever, and da 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 da. Like, oh, I kind of understand what you're talking about, but I've never really done a lot of exploring into that sport. But I did try just a few weeks ago my first 18-hole course and whatever, and now you got something to talk about with somebody who wouldn't normally fit your paradigm. And so that, I think, is another way of being lighter in the world, is to scramble.
I love it.
Now, here's something I would love to hear your thoughts on. And let's say something bad happens, and we'll not make it like super serious, like cancer or something else that's like totally life-changing. You simply stub your toe, right? So you stub your toe, and let's say instead of being reactive, swearing out loud or whatever, you just ask the question, why did that happen? Or what's the lesson? What am I meant to do with this? And so, yeah, I'm curious to hear what you do when that sort of situation happens. Yeah,
Well,
what do you
first
do
I
when?
will.
Yeah,
Well, I was just going to say, first, I will sometimes swear out loud at the top of my lungs if I stub my toe or cut my hand or something.
yeah,
I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
yeah,
Um, and then for me, it's like, okay, well, I did that. What I've noticed is so many of the things that have occurred that seem uh, like that, or you'll get cut off and people drive slow in front of you or something. I've noticed that so many times there is actually something that it changed either timing wise or energy wise in my day. It put my focus someplace else or put me someplace else. So things actually worked out better for me. Now, but one of the other things is your point of view creates your reality. Reality does not create your point of view. So, but that's my point of view is everything that shows up for me is going to make my life greater. And if some person, because I like to drive really fast, not unsafely fast, I just like to drive fast, in my lane. Thank you. I don't need to cut in and out, but I get really frustrated by slow drivers. And so there are a number of times where I'd have somebody driving really slowly in front of me, and up ahead was an accident, or up ahead was a cop, or the number of times I would arrive somewhere and I was just on time because of situations, and I would show up and I'd say, I'm so sorry, I wanted to be here sooner. And the person would go, oh no, actually, I just got free. Or, had you shown up sooner, you would have had to wait all this. And so what I've realized is so many of these situations of our lives occur because they're actually, if we're willing to have it, they're actually creating a greater flow in some way that we haven't acknowledged. In the
yeah,
case of stubbing your toe, what I do is I put my hands on, because we also have these hands on body processes. And I go, okay, body, what were you trying to show me? And for me, I know the entire, I don't know, most of the world is looking for what is the lesson here. But what I found is if we function from lessons, we tend to be less on, meaning we're looking for a specific thing that was supposed to be shown to us by the universe rather than letting in a different perspective of reality, which is what I would like to embrace. And so rather than lessons, I rather be a moron. But hey, that's just me. What are you going to
that's
do?
funny. Yeah, well,
But
the way you could frame it is simply, I want to be a creator in the world and not just passively receiving lessons all the time. And then you create a different reality than if you're like, all right, everything's a lesson and I'm here to go to school, then you get smacked upside the head a lot more.
yeah, and you very seldom graduate. And I want to point out just one thing really quick about the word want. If you look in a dictionary prior to 1947, it has all these definitions, most of which mean to lack. And it's a common, and so that's one of the words. Not many things do I hear where I want to give somebody the awareness or information, but given the nature of our conversation today, when we say I want, we're saying I lack of. And we say I want more money, what you're saying is I lack of more money, which is why it doesn't show up. A really cool exercise you could do is I don't want more money. And if you say that 10 times with the awareness of what want actually means, see if you get lighter. That's one of those words. If we could eliminate the word want, because anybody I have met that has been highly creative, has a lot of money, a lot of stuff, a lot of happiness, whatever, they don't use the word want. They say, I'll have, or I'm asking for, or I'm going to create this.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, we're up on time here. If our listener wants to learn these amazing tools, apply them in their lives, what is the next step and where should we send them to?
Well, you could go to drdainheer.com, which is DrDainheer.com. And there And also on my YouTube channel with the same name, which you can also access there, I've got something like 900 videos now that are accessible. They're free tools, my gift to you. What I say is go to the website and play around and see what piques your interest and check it out.
Awesome. Yep. And we'll include all the links in the show notes, and all that will be available at getyourselfoptimized.com. Thank you so much, Dane. This was fabulous and inspiring and insightful and a lot of fun. And I hope and I believe that our listener is going to take some powerful, positive action based on all your wisdom from today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stephan.